The Bill of Rights. You've definitely heard of it, you know it's important, but let's be honest, for a lot of us, these first 10 amendments to the Constitution can feel a little dusty, like a historical document that's locked away under glass. But what if they weren't just history? What if they were the only thing standing between you and an absolute nightmare? Okay, let's get into it.
To really get the power of these rights, we first have to imagine a world completely without them. So let's play out a little scenario, one that's pulled from real-world possibilities just to see how fast things could go south. Now, really think about it for a second. What if all those basic protections you just assume are there were suddenly, poof, gone?
It starts with something pretty normal, a creative writing assignment. A student, just trying to process the crazy world we live in, writes a poem. It's from the perspective of a fictional character, sort of an alienated kid. He posts it online.
A teacher finds the poem, totally misunderstands it, thinks it's a threat, and runs to the principal. Now, in this world we're imagining, this world without rights, there's no time for questions or due process. The student is immediately pulled into an office, strip-searched, and then interrogated for hours. No parent, no lawyer, nothing.
And then the police show up. They just barge right into his house, grab his computer, and demand all his passwords, all of it, without a warrant. Before he knows it, he's locked up in juvenile detention, his entire life turned upside down. I know this whole thing sounds extreme, right? But every single action we just saw, censoring his speech, the unreasonable search, forcing him to incriminate himself, is a direct violation of a right that you and I are guaranteed. This world could be real, but it isn't. And that's because of one single, crucial document.
You see, the Bill of Rights isn't just a polite list of suggestions. It's the hard-won answer to a huge problem. What do you do about a government that gets too powerful? It's our shield.
James Madison, the guy who is basically the architect of the Bill of Rights, didn't see these as just some minor tweaks. He called them the great rights of mankind. And that phrase is so important. It tells you these aren't just legal rules, they're fundamental to human dignity itself.
Okay, so let's start with the big one, the First Amendment. It isn't just one right, it's a powerhouse bundle of 5 freedoms all rolled into one. You've got freedom of religion, speech, the press, assembly, and petition. This is the absolute bedrock of a free society.
Now, remember our student and his computer getting seized? Well, the Fourth Amendment is what's supposed to stop that. It's built on that old idea that a man's home is his castle. It establishes your right to be secure from the government just barging in, and it usually means police have to get a warrant first.
And that interrogation? That's where the Fifth Amendment comes in. It gives us the right to remain silent. It puts the burden on the government to prove its case, not on you to confess. It's you with your arms crossed, looking the state in the eye and saying, prove it.
So where did these amazing ideas even come from? Well, they weren't just handed down from on high. They were the result of a really fierce, really nasty political fight. The Bill of Rights was actually a promise made to the American people while the country was arguing over whether to even have a constitution at all.
So the road to get here was super rocky. After the Revolution, the first government, under the Articles of Confederation, was just way too weak. Shays' Rebellion made that painfully obvious. So the founders get together and draft this new, much stronger constitution. But that power scared a lot of people. In fact, a bunch of states basically said, we're not signing this thing unless you promise to add a Bill of Rights.
And this split the country into 2 camps. You had the Federalists, who wrote the Constitution. They thought a Bill of Rights was pointless, maybe even dangerous. But then you had the Anti-Federalists. They were terrified that this new powerful government would just stomp on the very freedoms they'd just fought a war to win. They demanded a guarantee, in writing.
And this is where James Madison re-enters the story. Now, originally Madison was one of the skeptics. He called a Bill of Rights a paper barrier. But he was also a brilliant political operator, and he realized that the whole constitutional project was about to fall apart. A huge influence on him was his good friend, Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson wrote him this letter from Paris, and he made a powerful argument. He said a Bill of Rights isn't just some political deal, it's something that people are entitled to against every government on earth. And that perspective seems to have really helped flip a switch for Madison, turning him from a skeptic into a champion.
And here's where Madison's genius really kicks in. He took all the different amendments the states were demanding, but he strategically chose only the ones that protected individual rights, things pretty much everyone could agree on. He totally ignored the ones that would have weakened the new government. It was this brilliant political move that calmed everyone down, unified the country, and in the end, saved the Constitution.
But hey, the story doesn't just end in 1791. Not even close. The meaning of these rights is constantly being argued over, tested, and redefined. The promises written down on that old piece of parchment, they come to life in the real struggles of real people in courtrooms all across the country.
Take Mary Beth Tinker. It's 1965, and she and a few other students wear black armbands to school to protest the Vietnam War. The school suspends them, but their case goes all the way to the Supreme Court, which sided with them, saying yes, students absolutely have First Amendment rights. And the court's decision gave us one of the most famous lines in all of constitutional law. Students do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. That one sentence continues to protect students to this very day.
And remember the Fifth Amendment's right to remain silent? That got a huge boost from the case Miranda versus Arizona. The court basically recognized that being interrogated by police is naturally coercive, so they said police have to inform suspects of their rights, what we now all know as the Miranda warning, before they can start questioning them.
And what about getting a fair trial? Well, in Gideon v. Wainwright, a poor man named Clarence Earl Gideon had to defend himself in a Florida court, all by himself. The Supreme Court looked at that and said, no way, that is fundamentally unfair. They ruled that the Sixth Amendment guarantees you the right to a lawyer even if you can't afford one.
You know, all of these cases, they teach us a really important lesson. Our freedoms don't defend themselves. They're actually pretty fragile, and they require us to constantly be vigilant.
And this really gets to the heart of it. We often don't think about these rights until someone we really don't like starts using them. But as Justice Felix Frankfurter once said, the safeguards of liberty have frequently been forged in controversies involving not very nice people.
Protecting the rights of people we disagree with, the people we find offensive, that's the ultimate test of whether we actually believe in liberty. Because if their rights can be taken away, you better believe ours can be too.
So that leaves us with one last thing to think about. The Bill of Rights wasn't written to protect popular ideas. It was written to protect the ones we hate. So the real question for all of us isn't whether you support the rights of people you agree with. It's whether you're willing to defend the rights of those you don't. Because the moment we decide that some people don't deserve protection, that whole document, it becomes just another piece of paper.